The sun was setting over New York City, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. The streets below buzzed with life as people hurried home or gathered at cafes to enjoy the evening. It was an ordinary day, or so it seemed. No one noticed the faint hum growing louder in the distance, a sound that didn't belong to any aircraft humans had ever built. Daniel Carter sat in the cockpit of the Valor, his fingers resting lightly on the controls. He glanced at Lavra Bennett, his co-pilot, who was scrolling through reports on her tablet. They were on a routine patrol mission, one of many assigned to monitor Earth's orbit for anything unusual. The United Earth Defense Force liked to keep its eyes open, even if most days ended without incident. "Anything interesting?" Daniel asked, breaking the silence. Lavra shook her head. "Same old stuff. A few satellites drifting off course, some space junk, nothing we haven't seen before." Daniel chuckled softly. "Guess that means another quiet night." But then the hum grew louder, vibrating through the ship like an ominous warning. Both pilots froze, their attention snapping to the sensors in front of them. Something big was coming, something fast. On the radar screen, dozens of blips appeared out of nowhere, moving toward Earth at incredible speeds. "What the hell is that?" Lavra whispered, her voice tense. Before Daniel could answer, the first alien ship emerged from the darkness of space. It was massive, jagged, and black, its surface glinting faintly in the sunlight. More ships followed, forming a fleet that stretched farther than the eye could see. They hovered above the city, casting long shadows over the skyscrapers below. Panic erupted instantly. People on the ground screamed and ran as the alien ships began firing. Bright beams of energy shot down from the sky, slicing through buildings with terrifying precision. Glass shattered, steel melted, and flames roared to life wherever the beams struck. The once bustling streets turned into chaos, filled with smoke and cries of terror. Inside the Valor, alarms blared as the ship shook violently. Daniel grabbed the controls, trying to stabilize their vessel while Lavra frantically contacted command. "Command, this is the Valor. We've got unidentified hostiles attacking New York," she shouted into the comm system, requesting immediate backup. Static crackled in response. Command was overwhelmed, flooded with calls from every corner of the planet. The aliens weren't just targeting New York, they were hitting cities worldwide, striking with relentless efficiency. Lavra slammed her fist against the console in frustration. "They're not answering. What do we do?" Daniel clenched his jaw, his mind racing. "We can't just sit here. If no one else is coming to help, then we'll have to fight." The words felt hollow, even to him. The Valor was a small reconnaissance ship, designed for speed and stealth, not combat. Against the alien fleet, they stood little chance. But doing nothing wasn't an option either. As they watched, the largest alien ship descended closer to the atmosphere, hovering directly above Manhattan. A deep mechanical voice boomed across all frequencies, speaking in halting but clear English. "Humans, your expansion into our territory threatens our survival. You will cease your activities or you will be exterminated." The message repeated itself, cold and emotionless. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just an invasion, it was a declaration of war. Lavra stared at the devastation unfolding below them. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought about the lives being lost. Why are they doing this? Why now? Daniel didn't have an answer. All he knew was that they couldn't let this continue unchecked. "We need to get closer," he said finally. "Maybe we can find a weak spot, something we can exploit." Lavra nodded, wiping her eyes. "Let's do it." The Valor darted between the towering alien ships, narrowly avoiding blasts of energy that tore through the air around them. Each second felt like an eternity, the adrenaline coursing through their veins, keeping them sharp. They scanned the enemy vessels, looking for patterns or vulnerabilities. Then they saw a glowing node on the underside of one of the larger ships. It pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Whatever it was, it seemed important. "There," Lavra pointed to the screen. "If we hit that, maybe we can disable it." Daniel hesitated for a moment. Attacking such a heavily guarded target would be suicide. But staying passive wouldn't change anything. Taking a deep breath, he made his decision. "Hold on tight," he said grimly. The Valor banked sharply, accelerating toward the glowing node. Enemy fighters swarmed around them, their weapons blazing. Sparks flew inside the cockpit as the ship took hits, but Daniel kept his focus. With one final burst of speed, he lined up the shot and fired. The impact was explosive. The glowing node shattered, sending shockwaves rippling through the alien ship. For a brief moment, the entire fleet seemed to pause, as if stunned by the unexpected blow. Then, with a deafening roar, the damaged ship began to break apart. Pieces of it raining down onto the already devastated city below. That lava let out a shaky breath. Did we actually do it? Before Daniel could respond, another wave of alien fighters surged toward them. The Valor was battered and running low on fuel, its systems flickering dangerously. They had bought themselves a small victory, but it came at a cost. "We need to retreat," Daniel said reluctantly. "We've done what we can for now," reluctantly, Lavera agreed. As they pulled away from the battlefield, both pilots looked back at the burning city. The sight was horrifying, a grim reminder of how unprepared humanity truly was. "They started this war," Daniel muttered darkly, "but we're not going to let them finish it." Though battered and outnumbered, the resolve in his voice was unmistakable. Humanity might have been caught off guard, but they weren't defeated, not yet. Somewhere out there, others were fighting too, and together they would find a way to turn the tide. The attack on New York was only the beginning. Within hours, reports flooded in from every continent. Cities burned, skies darkened by alien ships, and millions displaced. The Krylos, as they called themselves, showed no mercy. Their weapons tore through human defenses like paper, leaving destruction in their wake. It was chaos, a nightmare that seemed impossible to escape. In Chicago, far from the initial strike zone, Alex Monroe worked tirelessly in a dimly lit warehouse. His hands were covered in grease as he tinkered with an old cargo ship, its hull battered but still intact. Around him, volunteers scurried about, carrying tools and welding equipment. Some were engineers like Alex, while others were ordinary. People desperate to do something, anything, to fight back. Alex's younger sister, Claire, stood nearby, barking orders. She had been a Navy officer before retiring to care for their ailing mother. Now, with war raging across the globe, she found herself stepping back into a leadership role. Her sharp voice cut through the noise of the workshop. "We don't have time to waste. Get those engines online or we're useless out there." Claire's determination inspired the group, though exhaustion was evident on everyone's faces. They weren't soldiers, not really. Most of them had never held a weapon or flown a ship. But they shared one thing in common, a refusal to give up without a fight. Alex wiped his brow and stepped back to examine his work. The cargo ship looked clumsy compared to sleek military vessels, but it was sturdy. With some modifications, it could carry weapons and supplies or even serve as a makeshift battleship. He turned to Claire, who was reviewing blueprints on a dusty table. "What do you think?" Alex asked, gesturing to the ship. "Will it hold up?" Claire studied it for a moment, then nodded. "It'll have to. We can't afford perfection. Right now, just make sure it flies." As the team continued working, news reached them of survivors regrouping at hidden bases around the world. One report mentioned a lunar outpost where pilots and engineers had gathered after escaping the initial assault. Among them were Daniel Carter and Laver Bennett, whose daring counterattack against the Krylos fleet had become a symbol of hope. "We need to contact them," Alex said, pacing back and forth. "If we combine our forces, maybe we can hit the Krylos harder," Claire agreed. Using scavenged communication equipment, she managed to establish a shaky connection with the lunar base. The face of Daniel Carter appeared on a small screen, his expression grim but resolute. "This is Commander Carter," he said. "Who am I speaking to?" "Claire Monroe," she replied. "We're civilians here in Chicago, trying to build a resistance. We've got ships, volunteers, and supplies. If you're planning a counterattack, we want in." Daniel hesitated. Working with untrained civilians carried risks, but they couldn't afford to turn away help. Every hand and every Ship counted now. All right, he said finally. Tell me what you've got. Over the next hour, Claire and Alex explained their progress. They had retrofitted several cargo ships, turning them into crude but functional war vessels. Dozens of volunteers were ready to crew them, despite having little experience. Daniel listened intently, impressed by their resourcefulness. There's a blockade around Earth, Daniel explained. The Krylos are using it to cut off our escape routes and reinforcements. If we're going to break free, we'll need everything you've got. Claire nodded. Understood? When do we move? Soon, Daniel replied. We'll send coordinates for a rendezvous point. Be ready. After ending the call, Claire relayed the plan to the team. Excitement rippled through the group, but also fear. These people weren't trained for combat. They were mechanics, teachers, shopkeepers, yet none of them backed down. They knew the stakes. If they didn't fight, no one else would. Meanwhile, on the moon, Daniel and Lava prepared for the upcoming battle. The lunar base was crowded with survivors, many injured or traumatized by what they'd witnessed. Morale was low, and tensions ran high between military personnel and civilians. Some argued that risking more lives was futile. Others believed surrender was the only option. Daniel refused to entertain either idea. Surrender isn't an option, he told the group during a tense meeting. If we give up now, the Krylos will wipe us out completely. Our only chance is to hit them hard and fast. Lavra stood beside him, her arms crossed. But how? Their technology is way ahead of ours. Even if we break through the blockade, we'll still be outnumbered. Daniel met her gaze. I know. But we've got something they don't. What's that? Someone asked. Desperation, Daniel replied. They think they've already won. They don't understand what humans are capable of when we have nothing left to lose. His words silenced the room. Slowly, heads began to nod. Hope sparked among the survivors, fragile but real, back in Chicago. The Phoenix Fleet, as Alex and Claire dubbed their ragtag group, made final preparations. Supplies were loaded onto the ships, engines tested, and weapons calibrated. Volunteers drilled endlessly, learning basic combat maneuvers and emergency protocols. Despite their lack of experience, they worked with a sense of purpose that bordered on obsession. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alex climbed to the roof of the warehouse to think. Below him, the city was eerily quiet, abandoned streets stretching out like scars. He thought about the people who had died, the homes destroyed, the lives shattered. And he thought about the Krylos, their cold, mechanical voices declaring humanity's extinction. They picked the wrong species to mess with. He muttered under his breath. Claire joined him moments later, handing him a cup of coffee. You okay? Alex shrugged. Just thinking about how much we've lost. Claire sipped her drink, gazing at the distant glow of fires on the horizon. Yeah, but we're still here. That has to count for something. It does, Alex said firmly. And we're going to make sure it counts for everything. Later, the Phoenix Fleet launched into space, joining Daniel and Lava at the designated rendezvous point near the edge of the moon's shadow. The sight of the civilian ships surprised the military personnel, but Daniel wasted no time. Introducing Claire and Alex to his team. These two have been working miracles down on Earth, Daniel said, gesturing to the siblings. Their ships may not look like much, but they pack a punch. Claire smiled modestly. We did what we could with what we had. Daniel nodded. It's more than most people could have done. Welcome to the fight. The combined forces reviewed their strategy. The Krylos blockade consisted of dozens of ships arranged in a tight formation, creating an impenetrable wall around Earth. Breaking through would require precision, coordination, and sheer guts. We'll use the retrofitted cargo ships as battering rams, Daniel explained. They're slow, but they can take a beating. Fighter squadrons will cover them, targeting key points in the blockade. Once we create an opening, the rest of the fleet moves in. And if it doesn't work? Someone asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then we die trying, no one argued. Everyone present understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a battle, it was humanity's last stand. As the fleet approached the blockade, nerves stretched taut. Pilots checked their instruments, crews double-checked weapon systems, and medics prepared for casualties. On the bridge of the lead ship, Daniel gripped the controls, his knuckles white. Beside him, Lavra monitored the radar, her eyes scanning. "For any sign of weakness in the enemy formation, you ready for this?" she asked quietly. Daniel exhaled slowly. "No, but we don't have a choice." The first wave of Krylos fighters surged forward, their weapons blazing. Human ships scattered, returning fire as best they could. Explosions lit up the void, debris spiraling wildly. The Phoenix fleet's cargo ships absorbed heavy damage, their reinforced hulls holding steady despite the relentless assault. Claire led a squadron of inexperienced pilots, weaving through enemy formations with surprising skill. Her voice crackled over the comm system, calm and steady. "Stay focused, watch your sixes and keep moving." Alex stayed aboard the flagship, coordinating strikes and relaying information to the fleet. Sweat dripped down his face as he shouted orders, his hands flying over the console. For all his doubts, he proved to be a natural leader, keeping the operation running smoothly, even as chaos erupted around him. Through it all, Daniel and Lavra pushed deeper into the blockade, searching for a weak point. Finally, they spotted it, a cluster of smaller ships forming a bottleneck. If they could disable those vessels, the rest of the fleet might slip through. "Lavra, lock onto those targets," Daniel ordered. "We're taking them out." The Valor accelerated, dodging blasts of energy as it closed in on the enemy ships. With pinpoint accuracy, Lavra fired missiles, each one striking true. The bottleneck collapsed, creating a narrow gap in the blockade. "This is it?" Daniel shouted over the comm system. "Go, go, go." Human ships poured through the opening, their engines roaring as they broke free of the Krylos trap. Cheers erupted across the fleet, mingling with cries of grief as damaged ships exploded behind them. The cost had been high, but they had succeeded. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity saw a glimmer of hope. The Krylos weren't invincible. They could be fought, and they could be beaten, but the war was far from over. The human fleet surged through the gap in the Krylos blockade, their ships battered but alive. Explosions lit up the void behind them as the alien forces scrambled to close the breach. For a moment, it felt like they had won a fleeting taste, a victory against overwhelming odds. But Daniel Carter knew better. Breaking through the blockade was only the first step. The real fight was just beginning. As the fleet regrouped on the other side, Daniel surveyed the damage. Several ships were missing, their fates unknown. Others limped along, leaking fuel and oxygen, their crews struggling to keep them airborne. Among them was one of the retrofitted cargo ships from the Phoenix fleet. Its hull was scorched black, and smoke poured from its engines, but it refused to fall apart. Alex Monroe's voice crackled over the comm system, strained but determined. "We're still here," he said. "Just tell us what's next." Daniel appreciated the grit. These civilians had proven themselves tougher than anyone expected. But admiration wouldn't save them now. The Krylos weren't done, not by a long shot. Their mothership loomed in the distance, a monstrous structure that dwarfed even the largest human vessels. It was the heart of their fleet, the source of their power. If humanity wanted to survive, they'd have to take it down. "Listen up," Daniel said, addressing the fleet. "That mothership is our target. Without it, the rest of their forces will fall apart. We hit it hard and fast before they regroup." Lavra Bennett leaned forward in her seat, studying the readings on her console. "It's heavily defended," she warned. "If we go straight for it, we'll get torn apart." Daniel nodded. "Then we'll need a distraction. Something big enough to draw their attention away from the mothership." Claire Monroe stepped in, her voice sharp and clear. "Leave that to us," she said. "We'll lead a smaller group of fighters to harass their perimeter. They'll chase us, giving you time to get close." Daniel hesitated. He didn't want to risk sending untrained pilots into such a dangerous mission, but Claire's confidence was unwavering. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure," Claire replied. "We've come this far. Trust us." With no better options, Daniel agreed. The plan was simple. Claire would lead a squadron of volunteers to distract the Krylos while Daniel, Lavra, and the remaining ships made a direct assault on the mothership. It was risky, almost suicidal, but they didn't have the luxury of playing it's safe. Claire gathered her team aboard one of the smaller ships, briefing them on the mission. Most of them were civilians, people who had never flown a fighter jet in their lives, but none of them flinched. They understood the stakes. This wasn't about skill or experience. It was about buying time for the others. "All right, listen up," Claire said, pacing in front of the group. "Our job is to make noise. Hit them hard, then pull back. Don't engage too deeply, they'll chew you up if you stay too long. Stick together, watch each other's backs, and remember, speed is our best weapon." The volunteers nodded, their faces pale but resolute. One young man raised his hand nervously. "What happens if, things go wrong?" Claire met his gaze without hesitation. "Then we do what we came here to do. We fight until we can't anymore." Satisfied, she returned to her ship, where Alex waited anxiously. "Be careful out there," he said, gripping her arm. "I mean it." "I'll be fine," Claire assured him, though her voice wavered slightly. "Just keep those engines running, okay?" "We're counting on you," Alex forced a smile. "Always." "Yes, sir." The fleet split into two groups. Tension filled the air. On one side, Claire and her squadron prepared to dive straight into enemy territory. On the other, Daniel and Lavra led the main force toward the mothership, their path fraught with danger. Both missions required precision, courage, and a lot of luck. Claire's team struck first, launching themselves at the outer edges of the Krylos formation. Their ships darted between the larger vessels, firing wildly and creating chaos. The Krylos responded immediately, sending waves of fighters to intercept them. Claire's voice echoed over the comm system, steady despite the storm around her. "Keep moving. Don't let them pin you down." Her squadron zigzagged through the battlefield, drawing fire away from the main fleet. Explosions erupted all around them, debris spinning wildly in the vacuum. One by one, the civilian pilots fell, their ships disintegrating under enemy fire, but they didn't retreat. Each sacrifice bought precious seconds for Daniel and the others. Meanwhile, Daniel and Lavra pushed closer to the mothership, weaving through the remaining Krylos defenses. The massive vessel loomed ahead, its surface bristling with weapons and glowing nodes. Lavra scanned the structure, searching for weaknesses. "There," she said, pointing to a cluster of energy conduits near the base. "If we hit those, we might overload their systems," Daniel nodded grimly. "Let's hope you're right." The Valor accelerated, dodging blasts of energy as it closed in on the target. Other ships followed, forming a tight formation to maximize their firepower. As they approached, the mothership unleashed a barrage of counterattacks, forcing the humans to scatter. Ships exploded in fiery bursts, their crews lost forever. But the survivors pressed on, driven by desperation and resolve. "This is it," Daniel said, his voice low but firm. "Fire everything we've got." Missiles streaked toward the glowing conduits, striking true. The impact sent shockwaves rippling across the mothership's surface, causing entire sections to collapse. Alarms blared inside the alien vessel, and its defenses faltered briefly. It was enough, but the victory came at a cost. The human fleet was decimated, reduced to a handful of ships barely holding together. Lavra stared at the wreckage surrounding them, her hands trembling on the controls. "We did it," she whispered, though her voice carried no joy. "We actually did it." Daniel didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the dying mothership, its once imposing form now crumbling into pieces. The Krylos fleet began to retreat, fleeing into the depths of space. Humanity had won for now. Back aboard Alex's ship, the crew watched the aftermath in stunned silence. The screens showed the remnants of the battle, drifting debris, burning wreckage, and the faint glow of Earth in the distance. Claire's squadron had taken heavy losses, but they had succeeded in their mission. Only 3 ships returned, including hers. Alex hugged his sister tightly as she boarded, tears streaming down both their faces. "You made it," he murmured. "You actually made it." Claire pulled back, her expression weary but proud. We held them off. That's all that matters. As the surviving ships regrouped, Daniel addressed the fleet. His voice was hoarse, but his words carried weight. Today we proved something to ourselves and to them. They thought they could destroy us. They thought we'd give up, but they were wrong. We fought and we survived. Cheers erupted across the com channels, mixed with sobs of relief and grief. The war wasn't over, not yet. But for the first time, humanity had struck back. They had faced the Krylos and lived to tell the tale, and they would keep fighting, no matter the cost. The victory against the Krylos mothership was short-lived. The human fleet had survived, but the cost was staggering. Ships floated lifelessly in space, their hulls torn apart. Crews that had fought bravely were now gone, leaving behind only silence. Earth itself remained scarred, its cities reduced to rubble and its people struggling to rebuild. Yet, amidst the devastation, a fragile hope lingered. Humanity had proven it could fight back. Daniel Carter sat in the cockpit of the Valor, staring at the wreckage around him. His hands rested on the controls, but he didn't move. Lavra Bennett sat beside him, her head bowed. Neither spoke. Words felt meaningless after what they'd just endured. They had won, yes, but the price weighed heavily on them both. We should head back, Lavra said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. There's still work to do. Daniel nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. He thought about the faces of those who hadn't made it, the pilots who had sacrificed themselves to draw enemy fire, the engineers who had stayed behind to repair. Ships mid-battle, the civilians who had joined the fight despite having no training. Each loss gnawed at him, a reminder of how close they had come to total defeat. As the surviving ships began their journey back toward Earth, Alex Monroe stood on the bridge of his retrofitted cargo ship, watching the screens. The view was bleak, endless fields of debris, glowing embers of destroyed vessels, and the distant curve of Earth, battered but still beautiful. Claire walked up beside him, her arms crossed. You did good out there, she said softly. We all did, Alex shook his head. It doesn't feel like enough. Look at this mess. How are we supposed to recover from this? Claire sighed. One step at a time. We've got each other. That's something. Her words carried weight, even if they didn't erase the pain. Alex glanced at her, noticing the dark circles under her eyes. She looked as exhausted as he felt. Still, she smiled faintly, trying to keep morale alive. It was something Claire did well, finding light in the darkest moments. Back on Earth, the survivors gathered in makeshift camps scattered across the globe. Refugees huddled together, sharing whatever food and supplies they could scavenge. Aid workers moved tirelessly among them, tending to the injured and comforting the grieving. The world had changed overnight, and everyone was struggling to adapt. In one such camp outside Chicago, Alex and Claire reunited with Daniel and Lavra. The four exchanged grim nods, their shared experience binding them together in ways words couldn't capture. They found a quiet corner to talk, away from the noise of the crowd. What happens now? Alex asked, breaking the silence. Do we wait for them to come back? Daniel shook his head. No, if we wait, they'll crush. Yes, we need to prepare. Rebuild our forces, improve our tech, and hit them before they regroup. Lavra added, and we need to understand why they attacked us. What drove them to this? Maybe there's a way to negotiate to avoid another war. Claire frowned. Negotiate? After everything they've done? It's worth considering. Daniel said firmly, war isn't sustainable. If we want to survive long-term, we need answers. To find those answers, Daniel and Lavra volunteered to investigate the ruins of the Krylos mothership. Though much of it had been destroyed, fragments of the vessel still drifted in orbit. It was dangerous work. The wreckage was unstable, and pockets of Krylos drones continued to patrol the area. But the risk was necessary. Hidden within the alien technology might be clues about their motives and weaknesses. The Valor approached the largest piece of debris, its jagged edges glinting faintly in the sunlight. Daniel guided the ship carefully, avoiding loose chunks of metal that floated nearby. Inside the cockpit, Lavara monitored the sensors, searching for anything unusual. There, she said, pointing to a blinking signal emanating from deep within. The wreckage. Something's active down there. Daniel steered the Valor closer, his heart pounding. As they entered the remains of the mothership, the air grew colder, the silence oppressive. The walls were scorched and cracked, evidence of the battle that had taken place. Strange symbols lined the corridors, glowing faintly in shades of blue and green. They landed in what appeared to be a central chamber. Stepping out of the Valor, Daniel and Lavra activated their suits' helmets, sealing themselves off from the vacuum of space. The room was vast, filled with alien machinery that hummed faintly. In the center stood a large console, its surface covered in intricate patterns. Lavra approached cautiously, her gloved hand hovering over the controls. This must be some kind of command center. Maybe we can access their data. Daniel kept watch, his weapon drawn. Be careful. We don't know what's waiting for us. Lavra tapped a sequence of buttons, mimicking the patterns she had seen earlier. To her surprise, the console lit up, projecting holographic images into the air. Streams of alien text scrolled past, too fast to read. Then, suddenly, a recording began to play. A Krylo's voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in broken but understandable English. Humans, you misunderstand our actions. Not born of malice, our world dies, resources depleted. Survival demands expansion, your presence, threat to our future. The message repeated itself, each word heavy with desperation. Daniel and Lava exchanged stunned looks. The Krylos hadn't attacked out of hatred or greed, they were fighting for survival. Just like humanity, they're dying, Lava murmured. Their planet is collapsing, and they see us as competition. Daniel clenched his fists. That doesn't excuse what they've done? Millions are dead because of them. No, Lava agreed. But maybe it explains why they're so ruthless. Desperation makes people do terrible things. The revelation weighed heavily on them. If the Krylos truly believed their survival depended on conquering Earth, then peace would be nearly impossible to achieve. Yet understanding their perspective offered a sliver of hope. Perhaps diplomacy wasn't entirely out of reach. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Alex and Claire worked tirelessly to rebuild the resistance. Using salvaged parts from the battle, they upgraded the remaining ships, making them faster and more durable. Engineers and volunteers poured into their operation, inspired by the stories of their recent victory. Slowly but surely, the Phoenix fleet grew stronger. Claire took charge of training new recruits, teaching them basic combat maneuvers and emergency protocols. Her leadership style was tough but compassionate, earning her respect from even the most skeptical members of the group. Alex focused on logistics, ensuring the fleet had enough fuel, ammunition, and supplies to sustain itself during future missions. Despite their progress, doubts lingered. The Krylos would return, that much was certain. And when they did, humanity would need more than just determination to survive. They needed a plan. Days turned into weeks as the human survivors worked to fortify their defenses. Lunar bases were reinforced, hidden bunkers stocked with weapons, and early warning systems installed to detect incoming threats. The combined efforts of military personnel and civilians created a fragile but functional network of protection. Daniel and Lava returned from their mission, bringing news of the Krylos' plight. At first, many were skeptical. How could they sympathize with the species that had brought such destruction upon them? But as the truth sank in, a shift occurred. Some argued for retaliation, while others pushed for diplomacy. The debate raged on, dividing the survivors. We can't trust them, one soldier said during a heated meeting. They'll use peace talks as a chance to regroup and strike again. Maybe, Daniel countered, but if we don't try, we'll never know. Fighting them head-on won't solve anything. We need to think bigger. In the end, a compromise was reached. Humanity would prepare for war, but they would also send a message to the Krylos, a gesture of goodwill, offering to share resources and knowledge in exchange for peace. It was a risky move, but it was better than resigning themselves to endless Conflict. As the fleet prepared for whatever came next, Alex stared at the stars through a cracked window. His mind wandered to the battles ahead, the lives that would be lost, and the uncertain future that awaited them. Beside him, Claire placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll get through this," she said. "Together." Alex nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, together." Though the road ahead was fraught with danger, humanity had proven one thing beyond doubt: they wouldn't go down without a fight. Whatever the Krylos threw at them next, they would face it head-on with courage, resilience, and an unyielding spirit. Weeks passed, and the human survivors continued to rebuild. The scars of war were everywhere: burned-out cities, abandoned streets, and families torn apart. Yet, amid the ruins, life began to stir again. Refugees returned to their homes, clearing debris and planting seeds in the soil. Aid workers distributed supplies, doctors treated the wounded, and teachers set up makeshift classrooms for children who had known nothing but chaos. In one corner of this fragile recovery stood Alex Monroe, overseeing a team of engineers as they worked on the Phoenix fleet. The ships gleamed under the sunlight, their once battered hulls now polished and reinforced. Each vessel bore the marks of countless battles, but they also carried the hope of a better future. Claire moved among the crew, checking progress and offering encouragement. Her presence was a constant reminder of what they were fighting for: survival, unity, and peace. Daniel Carter and Lavra Bennett spent their days coordinating with leaders across the globe, preparing for the Krylos' inevitable return. They knew it wouldn't be long before the aliens regrouped and launched another assault. Humanity's newfound understanding of the Krylos' desperation didn't change the reality of their threat. If anything, it made them more dangerous. A dying species with nothing left to lose would stop at nothing to survive, but Daniel refused to give in to despair. "We've got two choices," he told Lavra one evening as they reviewed plans in the dim light of their quarters. "We can sit here waiting for them to come back, or we can take the fight to them." Lavra looked up from the maps spread across the table. "You're talking about an offensive strike." "Yes," Daniel said firmly. "If we hit them first, we might cripple their ability to attack us. And if we time it right, we can send a message that humanity won't back down." It was a bold plan, risky and ambitious. But it wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about securing a future where negotiations could even be possible. Lavra hesitated, weighing the risks. Finally, she nodded. "All right, let's do it." The operation, codenamed Phoenix Rising, required precision and coordination. Using intelligence gathered from the Krylos mothership wreckage, Daniel identified a key target: a massive mining station deep in enemy territory. The station served as a hub for resource extraction, fueling the Krylos' war effort. Destroying it would cripple their supply lines and force them to divert resources away from Earth. To execute the mission, the fleet was divided into three groups. The first would serve as a diversion, drawing Krylos away from the mining station. The second would infiltrate the facility, planting explosives to disable its core systems. The third, led by Daniel and Lava aboard the Valor, would provide cover and ensure a safe escape route. Claire volunteered to lead the infiltration team, despite protests from her brother. "I'm the best pilot you've got," she argued, "and I know how to handle myself in tight situations." Alex reluctantly agreed, though his worry was evident. "Just promise me you'll come back." "I promise," Claire said, squeezing his hand. "We're not done yet." The night before the mission, tension hung thick in the air. Pilots checked their ships, engineers tested weapon systems, and medics prepared for casualties. In the mess hall, volunteers shared quiet conversations over meals, their faces etched with determination. No one spoke openly about fear, but it lingered beneath every word and glance. Daniel addressed the fleet one last time before departure. Standing on the bridge of the flagship, he looked out at the sea of faces watching him through screens and windows. His voice was steady, carrying both authority and compassion. "Tomorrow we take the fight to them," he said. "This isn't just about revenge or survival. It's about proving something to ourselves, to the Krylos, and to anyone else watching. We are humans, we adapt, we endure." and we will never surrender. Cheers erupted across the fleet, echoing through the void of space. For a moment, the weight of the mission lifted, replaced by a sense of purpose. These people weren't soldiers or heroes, they were ordinary men and women thrust into extraordinary circumstances. And yet, they stood ready to face whatever came next. The attack began at dawn. The diversionary force launched first, racing toward a distant Krylos outpost. Their engines roared as they unleashed a barrage of missiles, creating chaos and drawing enemy fighters away from the mining station. Alarms blared within the alien fleet, and ships scrambled to respond. Meanwhile, Claire's infiltration team slipped silently through the shadows, avoiding detection as they approached the mining station. The structure loomed ahead, a labyrinth of tunnels and machinery surrounded by defensive turrets. Claire guided her ship through narrow gaps, her hands steady on the controls. "This is it," she whispered to her team. "Stay sharp." Once inside, the crew disembarked, moving quickly through the corridors. The air was cold and metallic, filled with the hum of alien technology. Engineers worked frantically at consoles, oblivious to the intruders creeping behind them. Claire signaled for silence, her heart pounding as they planted charges at critical points throughout the facility. Back. Outside, Daniel and Lavra kept watch, fending off waves of Krylos fighters that tried to intercept the infiltrators. The Valor danced through the battlefield, dodging blasts of energy and returning fire with deadly accuracy. Laura's voice crackled over the comm system, calm despite the chaos. "We're holding them off, but hurry, they're closing in." Claire's response was clipped. "Almost done. Give us 2 more minutes." Time seemed to stretch endlessly as the team worked. Explosions rocked the station, shaking the walls and sending sparks flying. One by one, the charges detonated, collapsing sections of the facility and disabling its core systems. Claire's voice broke through the noise, triumphant but urgent. "It's done! Get us out of here." The infiltration team sprinted back to their ship, pursued by Krylos guards firing wildly. Claire took the pilot's seat, her fingers flying over the controls as the engines roared to life. The ship shot out of the station moments before the final charge exploded, engulfing the structure in flames. As the fleet regrouped, the full impact of their success became clear. The mining station was gone, reduced to drifting debris. The Krylos fleet reeled from the blow, their forces scattered and disorganized. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity held the upper hand. Daniel addressed the fleet once more, his voice filled with pride and resolve. "Today we struck back. Today we showed them that humanity isn't just a species, it's a force. But our work isn't finished. There will be more battles, more sacrifices. And when those times come, we'll stand together, because that's who we are." Cheers erupted again, louder this time. The fleet turned toward Earth, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they had taken a crucial step forward. The war wasn't over, but the tide had shifted. Back on Earth, news of the victory spread quickly. Cities lit up with celebrations, people spilling into the streets to cheer and embrace. Fireworks burst overhead, painting the sky with colors brighter than the fires of war. In Chicago, Alex watched the festivities from a rooftop, his arms crossed, as he thought about the cost of their triumph. "They'll remember this day," Claire said, joining him. "Not just the battle, but what it means. That we're still here, still fighting." Alex nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, still fighting." Below them, the city buzzed with life, a testament to humanity's resilience. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in months, there was hope. Hope that the Krylos might listen. Hope that peace could be achieved. And hope that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, humanity would rise to meet them, because that was who they were, fighters, survivors, humans.